All right, welcome everybody to this session on the CDR roundtable and how to collaborate and increase adoption. So this is an interesting session, which is sometimes the kind of session that tends to only happen at the summit, or is easy to do at the summit, where we kind of try to pick on a topic that is reasonably niche, but there's a certain amount of individuals that really care about it. And we try to also get the kind of industry to work together and to create something that allows to move the needle forward on the industry and to allow us to improve a particular part of security. So what I was thinking, so this is and I'll share this link in the chat. So basically I'll make it so that we can all edit. And then the idea is that we'll make this viewer afterwards, but for now we could all use this one to collaborate during the session. So I'm just going to paste the link there so you should be able to access it. And the idea is to capture the ideas, topics, and one area I would like us to think about going is probably sort of the labeling path. So I'll just very quickly show you what we just created literally an hour ago on this other session, where it was about creating security labels for COVID apps. And this was sort of inspired by this project from IoT Security that is kind of creating labels for IoT devices. And what I like about this is it creating a very objective and pragmatic way to measure a particular security property. So I think it's very relevant for us on the CDR industry. And I'm assuming everybody here knows, what that is, because I think you probably wouldn't be here. And then we can do the same thing for this, this software facts. This is an old idea about variation. And what we did in this session, the outcomes, where we just literally start to map out what are the properties that exist and the maturity from, in this case, consent on the application. This is a COVID tracing application to, where's the source code, plans for the commission data, plans for governance, plans for, when do you retain the data, where does it go? There's some very interesting security properties here to understand, how to protect the data and where it is and how long it lasts. From the other types of collection that you have, some privacy information, also the machine learning algorithms, how do they compare, how good do you know, types of data that you've got, and some use cases that you've got and some threats you're trying to protect against. So that's kind of what we created. So we can now use this one here to create similar things. And but I think it would be probably worthwhile, since we got a number of different players here. This might be one worth somebody, you guys introducing yourselves, because I think it's probably a good one. And you don't have to, if you don't want to say the company, but just maybe just say hi on here. And if you can share the company, and there's definitely a bit of a representation of Glasswall here. So that's where I work. And just I want to say that I'm the SVP of engineering and CISO, and we have now a very, sorry, I put my video on. We have a very strong commitment to openness. We have a very strong commitment to be a very good partner and player on the CDR industry. And we believe that it's a great market and we want to grow it. And I believe, we believe that, there's a lot of tons of use cases out there that are using this technology. So the concept is how do we can work together and increase adoption of this very powerful technology, which is the CDR. So somebody wants to have a quick go at just introducing yourselves?
I can go next. Hi everyone, I'm George Prikic. I'm Director of Problem Management at OPSWAT. We also, been involved in CDR for quite some time now. Our interest is mostly growing the market, or like the interest worldwide, not necessarily in OPSWAT focus. And same here.
Cool. Maybe I'll just call you guys in turn. Jonathan?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jonathan Green. I'm one of the sort of the senior longest-serving developers at Glasswall. I started there in 2010, before CDR was a thing. I didn't know what it was when I came to work on it, you know, I'm still finding that people don't know what it is now. So that's why I'm here.
Cool. Luke?
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Robertson. Also work at Glasswall. I'm operations manager at Glasswall. So I've kind of involved in you know, all the little pieces of don't have the technical depth that a lot of you will have. But trying to help all the teams kind of embrace our kind of modern structure, our modern ways of working, and you know, our real goal, you know, similar to yours, George, is just trying to increase the awareness and attention of CDR. You know, so we're really excited to see how we can collaborate in growing that worldwide attention of the space, which is a super powerful space.
Cool. Vin?
Hello, my name's Vin. I joined about 3.5 years after Jonathan as a senior developer. I was predominantly in the early days of Glasswall trying to get all of our analytics and content design code in. But due to the way our Glasswall engine works, where we don't really need to know about malicious threats because of the way we function, I'm predominantly here to try and just grow my understanding of the CDR scene, really.
Cool. Sorry, where's my list? Then George, Greg.
Hi, Greg Mann. I'm yet another person from Glasswall. I'm the QA manager for our core SDK. I suppose kind of my interest in this is quite often I get involved when we collaborate with other companies who are trying to integrate our products into their products.
Cool. Matt?
I'm Matt Cavey. I'm the cloud development manager at Glasswall. We take the sort of CDR product that our core team develops and build applications and solutions around it. Primarily, we have an email product, and we've recently launched the Rebuild API product, sort of offering the CDR services through a web interface.
Cool. Nadesh?
Hi, I'm Nadesh. Yeah, so I work on the cloud side. I'm the test lead. We test the what the core team produces in the cloud. Basically, we're currently working on the Rebuild API with Matt Cavey's team. My interest in this is really to know more about, you have more information on from different people on CDR. So at the moment we're working on how we get a good set of test data files to work with, you know, when testing.
Cool. I think final one, Oren?
My name is Oren Schnitzer. I am the CTO of Resec Technologies. We've been selling CDR since 2012 in Israel, mostly.
Cool. Now, and Oren and George, I really thank you for coming. I was a bit worried that you would just be the Glasswall crowd, you know, talking about this. And then if you want to, you know, bring a couple more people from your team, you know, please feel free, right? We still have, you know, time for that. I think maybe to start with, you know, let me just share my I think you can see my screen. Let me just change the window actually, because we can kind of start with maybe the sort of the definitions, right? You know, are we happy with these definitions? Are we happy with the way, you know, we kind of get presented in the market. So let me just make sure that I got the right screen, and then we'll take from there. All right, sorry, share screen. I'm having a lot of windows to try to find which one is it on yeah. I will take this one. Right. Okay. So that works. Okay. Cool. So what I've tried to add here is that this is the current definition of CDR, right? It's a computer technology for removing potential malicious code from files. Unlike malware analysis, CDR technology is not determined to detect malware functionality. It removes all components that are not approved within the system definition policies. Any comments on this one? You agree? Disagree? It's a good definition.
High level, I think, kind of like covers what CDR is, but I think it's more about, I don't know, the devils in the details, right?
Yeah.
If someone reads this one, let's say a potential customer is going to read this, they're like, that kind of makes sense. When they start actually trying to understand technology, usually like one of the big bottlenecks is that they need to like see, okay, am I allowed to change the files? How is that going to affect? Is there going to be any legal implications and things like that, right? So the fact it's saying that it's going to remove potentially malicious code is not necessarily something. Maybe it's going to fully click that, hey, this is going to be a brand new file. It's going to be a totally changed file, right? New hash and things like that.
It also doesn't really fully describe the functionality because if you look at the sort of stuff that certainly the things that Glasswall does, it's not necessarily malicious malware code we're pulling out. It's other things like sort of potential sort of leaky things within metadata and things like that. So it's maybe we should be addressing that as well in the definition.
Well, I think that's partially covered at least, right? It's like it's potentially malicious. Malicious doesn't have to be necessarily, I don't know, literally like I don't know, exploit kit or the malicious payload, like the malware itself in that one, right? It can be something, I don't know, like risky if you want like a better word or something like that, right? It can be not just malware per se, can drive some, I don't know, data leakage as well if you want. But still towards like a bad behavior, let's say. And sorry if I'm not finding my best words right now. It's like 6 a.m. for me, so I'm just trying to have my coffee.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Terrible content.
The second paragraph. Carry on, George.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the second paragraph where it talks about the channels being email or website traffic. I mean that seems to be quite limited and quite specific. Like why are those the only channels that we could potentially protect from file? It's file protection, it's document protection, right? Just seems a bit limited in its application based on that kind of second paragraph.
Right. I mean, the focus was a bit on the first one, but on second, I think that I agree with you. It's like even with the second sentence where it says something about like on the endpoint cloud, even sharing services, it's still not covering at all. Like at the end of the day, it's any kind of like productivity files, right? Like regarding of the source or input channel and so on. So I agree on that one.
Any other comments? Oh, you can always put on the chat. I think we can also take a look at the chat.
In my view is there's sanitization that CDR does, which I think is a nice word. You can clean out specific content, functional content within a file, hyperlinks or embedded content or metadata, etc. So I think that's a very big and a very powerful part of minimizing risk in the commercial space. Which maybe is not alluded to, that in plain English in the description. And then there's the structural, the reconstruction, which is, what Jonathan was alluding to, which is, cleaning up structural anomalies and bloat and things that just, aren't part of the spec that just don't need to be there. So you're reducing risk by making sure you've got a clean and benign structure. But you can also reduce risk by choosing to sanitize certain types of content. That's where I see the value in what CDR does. I think something along that in plain English would probably be more meaningful than, potentially remove malicious code. Yes, that's true, but that's not, the objective. The objective is to provide a, clean, benign, disarmed file. And often, that's done through removing malicious code. We might not have known that it was malicious at the time of removal.
I mean, we remove unwanted content, which
Yeah.
could be malicious content, or it could be, unwanted metadata, or could be incompletely redacted content and things like that. So unwanted is a much more general term, I think.
I tend to slightly disagree on that one, right? Like, because at the end of the day, okay, let's say I have an Excel with, 3 macros. They're like legit macros. If we're gonna remove those ones, they're gonna perceive it as like it's wanted, right? So, and that's always kind of like a discussion with me. What do you remove? How do you know it should be removed or not, right? Because the policy usually it's gonna be, I'm gonna remove it all. And sorry, I should turn off my camera as well, but I feel like I'm not on my brightest day. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, it's based, let's say, on the policy on like what exactly you want to remove, right? But it's not going to make any difference between what can be a legit or like something that you're supposed to receive anyway, embedded object, right? Versus something that might be that potentially malicious, risky, and so on. Because the entire technology is based on the fact that we're not going to detect if it's anything malicious or not, right? So unwanted, it's a bit too broad from my perspective. But anyway, I think it's like semantics here, but.
It's good to hear the view though. Dennis, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a good distinction that CDR is not a detection mechanism. So first of all, the goal of CDR is to protect. One of the main goals of CDR is to protect from malware. And protection from malware can be divided into detection and prevention. And I think this definition does not clearly say, it does say, but it does not state right at the beginning, CDR is a prevention mechanism. And the second thing is CDR does not remove malicious code as many people have said. We don't necessarily touch only code. We're looking at elements, at the structure, a lot of other things that are not written yet.
Yeah, because we basically rebuild into known good, right?
Yeah.
So what we want is to actually put the file at the state where it's actually in a known good state, which by proxy removes the malicious code, right? But actually by proxy the removes whatever our definition or whatever the definition of malicious content is.
I was going to say known good or known safe.
Yeah. Well, it's our definition of good, right?
Which is safe.
Yes, safe. Yeah. So George and Oren, have you looked at the ISGs, those isolation and sanitization standards that the NSA have published?
I only briefly went through them, I think, like a couple of weeks back when I saw the presentations.
Because let me put it there, because I think that they represent a really key piece of the puzzle, and as we look at looking at creating standards and having anchors for a lot of the stuff that we do, I think these represent a really powerful thing. So this is from a session we created. So we basically took all the ISGs from the NSA, which are publicly available, and we put on these repo. So you got every single one of them that have been published. And each of those contains, quite a lot of detailed information on what you want to do with it. And the most interesting part of this is they contain this section, which is the action section, where, sorry, it doesn't have the link here, where it actually determines there you go. right? What you're supposed to do. And one of the things that we had a really good session on, which is this, on the ISG, like what security exploits are implemented, are prevented by ISGs. And now, you can literally replace ISG with CDR here, right? And actually, just to go to the punchline, one of the things that we identified was this is kind of examples of things that he addresses, right? Vulnerabilities in file parsers, exploits, masquerading files, crashes caused again by malformed files, dangerous functionality, macros, metadata, etc., and data leakage, right? And that's kind of, in fact, maybe on this one, if I replace ISG with CDR, right? In fact, we can do this here. What would you change, or what you want to add to say that the CDR also addresses this? So if you look at these topics here, what else would you say that? Well, sorry, I was trying to fix this guy here. Okay, so what would you say that CDR also protects against? If we go CDR. So what use cases you say CDR addresses?
To a certain level, most of them. There are some of them that are more like partially, let's say. But I just have like one quick comment before we drill down this one. From my perspective, the Wikipedia definition for like everything, it's kind of like a very simplified version of the true definition, not just CDR, like everything, right? Like it's a matter of like, I don't know, how I explain technology to my mom, for instance, to understand. It's for wider public consumption. In general, it's not supposed to be like very technical or like, I don't know, very detailed, let's say, right? At least that's how I perceive it.
Yeah. Well, some Wikipedia definitions go very technical, right? And I guess the interesting question is if we as an industry come together and help to define what it is, then we can change it, right? Because
I mean, yeah, it's public information. Like we can change it anyway, right? Like it's a matter of like, okay, who's gonna consume that information, right? Like who's gonna be the person that, or like kind of that user persona that we want for them to consume that info and to understand it, right? And the moment we're gonna start putting a lot of like buzzwords and keywords in that definition, it's gonna be like kind of like 10 lines definition and so on. It's gonna be very hard to digest. That's what I'm trying to say.
And actually, that's something that maybe we should cover here, which is an interesting point, right? Which is, if you look at it from our side, what is the audience, right? So we can have just a quick thread here of, what we think, right, is the CDR, at least some of the audience that we may be not reaching out, or we need to be better at it, right? But if we look at this situation, like, or what it protects against, would you want to add anything? Do you think there's others that, we're missing or it's not well represented here?
I guess the metadata removal and things like that falls mostly under data leaks.
So would you want to expand on this one?
I mean, we can, but it's a matter of like, again, I don't know one-to-one, let's say, what each of the technologies are doing in the market. But based on my knowledge, again, there are, let's say, based on my technology, it might be easier just to talk about like about myself, right? Most of these things are covered, right? There are a couple more things that are being done a little more advanced. Okay, you have masquerading files, which is a bit of a fancy term, let's say, right? But it's a matter of like sanitizing the compound files, like archive files, or like recursively sanitization of everything that's embedded and so on, right? It's not just the top level file or something like that. So some level, it's not 100% defined. How is that going to look like?
See, that's actually, That's a good point, because in a way, it's not just archives, right? It's GIFs and in JPEGs and stuff inside other files, right? It's embedded files inside, even others, which in some cases might be almost kind of quasi accepted, but you want to make sure that those are actually also done to a good spec.
Right. I mean, so again, without going too many details, like whenever I have a conversation with the customer or the prospect and so on, that's one thing they say, like, because one of the main questions is like, okay, how fast is it? Like, what's going to be like my expected, average time for sanitization, right? It's a matter of, if you give me a PDF, 100 pages, one image per page, I'm going to sanitize 101 files, let's say, right? It's like, it's not just one file is being sanitized, even though that's your input necessarily.
Cool. So I can catch that, so processing time, right?
Yep.
That's one metric. But just maybe to just nail this one, right? In terms of what we protect, and I kind of tried to get here from the idea of, the so what? Like, what do we do with the file, right? Like, yeah, we can say we make it safe, but realistically, what we're making safe against, right? Which is sort of why I arrive in vulnerability in file parsers, because the biggest reason why badly formed files are problematic, I would say from a security point of view, is either they can crash the other side application, the service that maybe is running some image processing files, but also they can trigger buffer overflows, right? They can trigger specific exploits on the actual parser on the other side, right? Which is, most of this is actually buffer overflows, right? And because this is the thing that really hits the customer, right? Basically they get compromised because a parser was not able to, safely handle, an image or a PDF or a particular document, and then it popped, right?
I think that will be kind of the majority, right? I mean, to a certain level, again, we shouldn't discuss necessarily like buzzwords, but one of the things that drove a lot of traffic and so on was like 0 days attacks in Office and PDFs. And again, those are like, for me, buzzwords. At the end of the day, yes, they can exploit a known vulnerability or known or unknown, let's say it's like 0 days and so on, right? But there are like a lot of functionalities, and I think that's kind of going to a dangerous functionality, right? From our side, anything that has a document type that has more or less advanced features like active content, active objects that can do something at runtime, even like a hyperlink and so on, right? Those are the ones that can be exploited one way or another, right? Doesn't have to be necessarily a vulnerability. The fact I can attach a script and let's say PowerPoint is not going to have any interest in know what that script is all about, right? The fact I can put the script to run when I click, when I open a slide or something like that, that's something that can actually be used in a malicious way. So for me, any advanced functionality might be used in a malicious way. Doesn't have to be necessarily exploiting the vulnerability.
Yeah, and this is actually something that I remember when we were talking to the team, and we were talking about, for example, how the first focus, well, we going against the spec, right? So we check against the spec. The problem is, the spec has dangerous functionality, like you said, right? So a macro is actually part of the spec, right? Executing JavaScript is part of the Adobe Acrobat spec, right? And I think what we're saying is that, look, that has security implications, right? And that's why I like the ISGs, because what I like about the ISGs is that they try to define that, right? So the ISGs basically are saying, hey, if these are functionality that is dangerous and you should get rid of it, right? This is functionality that we've identified that you can do a data leak here, or there's a buffer overflow that can occur to here. And I think they provide a really good blueprint for us for the definition of what is meant to be a safe file.
Yeah, I mean the functionality and sort of embedded content side of things is particularly interesting. When I first started working on PDF for my sins a very long time ago, the number of capabilities PDF had, which I never knew were in there. The ability to attach bits of arbitrary executable code and have it trigger when you open a particular page or whatever. Embedding 3D data. I mean, there are things. I mean, most people I speak to you ask them what a PDF do, they think it's just a document exchange. They just don't realise what the functionalities are and the amount of potential it has for, you know, unexpected, shall we say, content.
Yeah. And that's why, and I think, you know, if we go back to, you know, because, you know, when I was, you know, well, I'm still a CISO, but, you know, a CISO not focused on CDR technology, I think that one of the biggest challenges we have in our industry is the fact that the security community today doesn't believe what we do, right? You know, if I talk to a lot of peers, especially more technical ones, they still don't think that CDR is a valid solution until they experience it, right? Of course, you know, the ones that we reached out, the ones that we work as customers, the ones that we work with are there, but as an industry, you know, I'm yet to see an article that, you know, out of the bat says, oh, if you're worried about, for example, malicious file attachments, look at CDR because that is a great technology. It's still going, make sure your AV is up to date, make sure you don't click on things you're not supposed to click, where we really should be saying that we can make the file safe. And here's our formula for making the file safe. So let's have a conversation if that formula is not correct.
I think it's a chicken and egg situation here, right? Because at the end of the day, you cannot expect, let's say, for the early adopters to drive the entire market. And maybe early adopters is not necessarily the right word because the technology has been a while, around for a while, right? But it's a matter of like all the peers, like it or not, they're going to talk to their peers, right? Like, and they're going to be able to say, okay, what are you using for that one? I'm using a sandbox for email. Okay, maybe I should look in that. Right? Like, I'm going to read reports. Gartner is saying that, I don't know, if I'm using that solution, the leader in email space is that one that's using a sandbox. And that's kind of like the main driver, right? Like they're going to rely on something that is proven by the market, not something they're going to POC it, right? It's, at the end of the day, it's their job, there's their reputation on the line, right? Their entire brand. So it's a matter for us, let's say, to educate that market. And pretty much the reason I'm here as well, like they need to get like a better adoption. Now, I can tell you based on our experience that we've seen a lot of growth in this space in the last like 2 or 3 years, right? So from our perspective, adoption increased a lot. And we started getting a lot more traction. It's a matter of like use cases and for them to understand. And this is like region based, right? Like there are regions where it's a lot more focused on CDR. We do have like a lot more functionalities in the product, not just CDR, right? Some of them, let's say, I mean, first, our solution has been around for over 10, like almost 15 years now with the multi-scanner, because that's how we started, right? And that was like the early adopters for us was on the multi-scanner, and that was the main market here recently. For them, the interest was, let's say, more on the multi-scanning side, but CDR, again, got a lot more traction even in US, right? And for me, US is the one that it's slowly responding to new technologies comparing to other markets. Israel is one that adopts a lot of the new technologies, and we have like a big footprint there. Mm-hmm. We have a lot more focus. Let's say maybe APAC is the one that responds a lot more to CDR. But again, we started getting a lot of traction in the US as well. So people already starting catching up on it, right? It's a matter of like educating your audience a little bit better. And that's kind of a problem that you're always going to have, especially if you're going, the people that have like most of the budget are the ones that are driven by, let's say, regulations, or like large organizations that they need to secure that environment. And whenever you talk about regulations and so on, if you need to, like, say, if you change the file and you want to keep, and your regulation says that if you change the file and to keep it for like 10 years in archives and so on, that's sort of like a concern, right? So those kind of things that we need to find a better way to like position technology for them to understand how to react to it, right? Because this is pretty, I know, it's not like, okay, an additional functionality on top of what they have. This is a very drastic change from their perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's going to secure it, this is going to change, right? Like they have no guarantee at the first conversation that we're not going to change anything in the content. So if I remove, I don't know, a digitally signed PDF, let's say, right? Like the DocuSign, whatever source out there. If you change that signature and so on, and they see like the red thingy there, they're like, okay, I'm going to get in problems with my legal because contracts are going to be, I don't know, invalid and so on, right? So those are kind of things that we need to do, I think, a better job to educate those people like on their expectations and so on. Even though technology-wise, it's there, like delivering technology, it's not even though it's a very hard thing, I'm not going to disagree on that one. I think educate the market and actually take it to market, it's a little bit harder. And that's the one that, again, we've seen success, and I think there's like a lot more room to growth anyway. But the moment they're gonna see a lot more adoption amongst their peers, that's when we're gonna get a lot more, I don't know, love from the media, if you want.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely right. There's a that's I agree. That's a question too. So, John.
That's a can of worms right there with the whole thing of digital signatures and the fact that we actually modify files. It's a huge headache all round, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think by design, right? I think we
yeah.
should
Well, it's
that, right?
the nature of the beast. You know, if you have a digitally signed file and you change the content, then the signature immediately becomes invalid. It's simply inherent to the technology.
Right, but the impact on, let's say, the usability, right? Like, think about this way: everything you deploy, mostly, let's say, everything you deploy in the backend as security functionality, it's highly transparent for the end user, right? So the fact you deploy the CDR, it's not like the CISO is going to go in the organization one-on-one. We deploy CDR, you're going to get your file sanitized. From now on, click whatever you want, open whatever you want, not a problem, right? That's never going to happen. So, and if they're legal, I know, 2 weeks down the path receives a document, or not even legal, like anyone receives a document and it's like a big wording sign there that, hey, this was modified, cannot trust, and so on. That's going to be a huge buzzkill, right? And they need to explain and so on. So that's like one of the easy ones for them to understand and to be concerned about. And they're like, probably from that one, they're going to perceive like, okay, this can happen everywhere. Maybe I'm going to change something that I shouldn't, and I'm going to get like, I don't know, a lot of pushback on this technology, right? And that's why there are certain use cases where this is easy to adopt, and there are certain use cases when they're gonna think twice, let's say, before adopting it, regardless if it's a good technology or not, right? At the end of the day, from my perspective,
interesting you should raise that stuff, considering that, I mean, certainly in the case of Glassroll, at least some of our biggest early adopters have actually been legal firms who would assume will have considered this stuff and the regulatory and compliance issues quite carefully. So,
well, it's a matter of, I think, first the adoption for like e-signature is it grew a lot in the last year, couple of years, right? What was maybe like, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, it was slightly different. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of, from my perspective, the way I see it, like any security functionality or like product you put in place, right? If it's something that's gonna contradict, or like, I know it's not something exactly how you want to do, you're going to try to find ways to like bypass it, to go around it, right? And this is going to be an example of like where they have to go around it, right? And if these kind of examples come up, then be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't use this one at all, right? And that, I mean, again, it's a matter of like
workflows. It has impact on workflows, and workflows need to be designed to, you know, take account of the nature of the beast. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess another use case, right, that at the moment is problematic, right, is whitelisting of macros, right? For example, because at the moment, well, and this maybe is a limitation that we have, right? And by the way, like the thing about what I feel we need to come up with here is also a way to measure our industry in a pragmatic way. So it doesn't mean that our tools do everything, right? In a way, each of us have a specific sense of gravity. But I think it's important to be able to say, here are all the different kind of use cases, and here are all the different usability issues and variations that you can cover with this, and actually to have a nice way to even compare the different tools and to compare the different solutions, especially because one of the things I'm also quite interested in, and the reason why I also put a lot of, I would say, effort internally to do this and to make sure that we can collaborate, is we have customers that want multiple solutions, right? So I actually think that we need to go to markets where we basically go as a team, right? Where we say, look, you know, if you are a bigger customer and you have a bigger requirements and you have bigger security concerns, and yes, you know, you don't want to, you know, you want to apply good security principles, so you don't want just to use OPSWAT, or you don't want just to use Glasswall, because you know, you don't want to trust 100% in them, because after all, they are creating a document, right, that you're going to consume. You know, what we've seen already customers do is, especially for the ones that embed us in filters, is they run multiple tools in sequence. And I feel that's a great opportunity for us, because we should also collaborate in a way that we can nicely fit into solutions where our engines work nicely with each other. And in a way, each one does something a bit better than the other, which is cool, right? Because for the more, you know, I would say, customers are very security sensitive, they will run a number of those in a row, right? And then you almost get the best of all worlds, right?
Couldn't agree.
Without going too many details on that one, there were like that multi-CDR approach, let's say. The only thing I would say that multi-CDR approach I'm aware of, and I'm pretty sure you are as well, is the one with, again, it's like a serialized process, right? And the moment you kind of like, let's say we put together that matrix, which sounds to me more like a competitive analysis, let's say, than anything else, like who's doing what, how what's doing better, and so on, right? But even if you put that together, right, that can and will be used against us one way or another, right? That's the way, like, not a lot of companies are going to be, for me, like that mostly it's going to be, let's say, government to define like a gateway product from like the low to high, like the need for to see things like that, right? But other than that, it's pretty much going to be like, okay, let's say OPSOT is doing this particular thing better than Glasswall, then you're going to go and improve that one. So that's going to be always kind of like a live metrics for us to like kind of catch up one another. Let me put it this way, right? Mm-hmm. But instead, it's not going to be necessarily focused on collaboration per se. It's going to be more on like understanding, like, okay, what's my competitive edge? What's the landscape? What should I do better, and so on. But leaving that aside, right? When we're going to like different deals that are looking at, okay, I need also synthesization functionality, CDR functionality in my analysis pipeline. They usually do their own POC, right? I know there's a different initiative on defining like a sample set, because there's like so many file types with so many, I don't know, different objects in it, complexity and so on. It's hard for us to have like, here's 50,000 files, data set, go play around, right? But in the same time, and trust me, we're part of anti-malware testing standardization, the EMSA organization, and they kind of had the exact same thing, right? The moment the vendors put together a sample set, or even if they put together a sample set, there's always going to be some bias, right? And if you know that everything's going to be tested against that particular sample set, you're going to, I don't know, prioritize defining your solution to perfectly align with that sample set, not with a real life scenario, right? That's kind of like what they were trying to put together. And they're like different, I don't know, standards there, like how you should test anti-malware products and so on. So that would be something like here as well. But getting back to this discussion, it's more about like, okay, if from my side, like that metric is going to help only for us to know what to enhance where, who's doing better what, right? Not necessarily to go to the customer and for them to get like that multi-CDR approach. But even if they go with the multi-CDR approach, it's going to be always kind of like a challenge to a certain level, right? There's a couple of things, let's say, if OPSOT is doing PDF better and OPSOT will be the first one, then it's going to be Glasswall. Versus, I don't know, you guys are doing better, whatever, XLSX, you're going to be the first and we're going to be the second, right? There are a couple of things that we're going to do potentially different. Maybe the outcome is going to be better, but maybe I cannot safely consume your output or something like that, even though I should. Just an example.
But the interesting thing is that we already been on the receiving end of that problem, right? We already been on the receiving end of the customer who does put multiple engines in sequence. And then we having to actually sometimes reverse engineer some of the stuff that's happening. And actually what ends up happening in that case was because we were not collaborating with each other, it was actually the integrator that had a nightmare of making it work, right? In that particular case. But I would add that I don't think the point here is to compete CDR to CDR, right? Like I was actually, again, my view on this is that our competitors are not you guys, right? Like my view is that, yes, there might be a couple of cases where, we might go head to head, a couple of cases where customers might go, this use case versus that case. But I feel the biggest challenge is that our technology is not being used, right? The biggest challenge is that the number of players using CDR technology is still very low, where in reality, it already adds insane value from a security point of view. And I feel that's the space. The space is like, you know, if we two dogs arguing against a bone that was thrown from the butcher shop, right? Maybe we shouldn't be arguing against that bone, right? We should try to figure out how to, you know, get access to the main market, right?
Well, yes. Again, where the goal, at least the goal of this meeting, right, is for us to find ways how we can work together to make this more maybe like mainstream, if you want, right?
Yeah.
As technology.
So one of the challenges that we are seeing in different markets is not about digital signatures. It's more about the integrity of the outcome of the sanitized document. And we've seen that a lot in markets that have had good reception for CDR. So I can name, there are certain markets that have CDR penetrated those markets very well. And then after 1 year, customers just left the product, stopped buying it, and the product has just a very bad reputation there. CDR, not specific product, not specific vendor. I think that in order to become mainstream, the main goal is not to discuss and agree about what security actions we do. I think the main thing is about improving the quality of CDR products. And there are products in the market that are not that good. If you are going to sanitize a document and there is an 80% chance the document is going to come out fine and 20% it's not, you're not going to buy this product.
Yeah, and so, but this is where, you know, to be fair, that's kind of what I feel that when we have that, you know, checklist of stuff that happens, right? In a way, we are raising the bar for what is a CDR product, right? And I feel that there is a number of players who are doing a good job, right, or a great job at this, and there's the players who are not, right? So, so I think you mentioned that there is a certain players out there who are not doing that much good job, and then they bring down the industry because you know the customer doesn't trust the CDR technology anymore. Is that?
Do we perhaps need an accepted benchmark for measuring the relative quality of solutions in terms of fidelity of output, shall we say? Would that be helpful?
Yeah. Well, and I know, George, that there is a problem of gamifying this a little bit.
Yeah.
But I feel that our technology, it's a little bit, I would say, harder to gamify, because with antivirus, you are looking for a signature, right? Literally, you can, you know, I can hard code, I can create, if you give me 10 files or 100 files or 1,000 files, I can create a very silly engine that just does a great job at telling you that those 1,000 files are bad, right? Just even by statistic analysis. I think our technology almost prevents that in a certain way, because you either can take content out or not, right? You either rebuild the file, you know, you either reconstitute the file or not. It's kind of like you either have the ability to go to the file and then there's multiple ways to do it. You can actually go to the file and take the file. You can just rebuild it based on object models. So there's multiple techniques I'm sure get used, but there is kind of a binary thing of either it's there or not, right? You know, and in fact, we can even use multiple engines, right? So if we have an engine that, you know, like we already do this to show the demos where we pass a file first with macros on, and then we show a nice little red saying, hey, there was a macro here, but we took it out, but hey, from a threat intelligence. But then if I take the same file, the sanitized file, and pass it again, I say, oh, look, it's green, right? Hey, you know, we couldn't find anything, or we didn't see anything kind of that, at least, you know, based on a couple of metrics, it's bad. So,
yeah.
You know, you can do the same.
I was actually thinking of metrics for the other side of that coin in terms of how much of the content which people want to transmit and we need to transmit, we're actually preserving, or actually demonstrating that yes, what comes out is really visually the same as what goes in, and we're not, you know, sort of wrecking things that we process. Which is a different, it's exactly the opposite side of that coin. Not how good are we at taking out the unwanted stuff, but how good are we at retaining the real content that people want.
I mean, from my understanding regarding the real content that people want removed is not malware, isn't it? Because from the media, from what I hear from different companies, or what people are more concerned about is malicious content. It's malware. It's the real bad stuff that they're worried about. If you take a recruitment company, for example, they have lots and lots of CVs coming through, and obviously they want to be sure that whatever files they open up, it's 100% safe for the business, for the company. And what they worry more about is the malicious files, virus files that can damage their business processes, etc. So I guess the confidence in how much sales is driven from CDR is how much is whether or not it can remove those type of issues, rather than the bits that people don't know about. Because before joining Glasswall, for example, I didn't know about items you see on a PDF file. You just see a normal PDF files as it is. You don't know whether it's got scripting, it's got stuff under. But people are worried about that as well, but they're more worried about whether or not that file can actually break the functioning of their system.
Well, they're worried about that, and they're worried about whether what they get through is actually legible and does actually contain all the content, all the information which was in the original. I mean, I had the impression from early comments that some adopters or potential adopters were concerned that basically CDR was mangling an unacceptable number of documents, and being able to demonstrate that no, we do have a very high rate of getting documents through intact and with all the content visible would be a good thing.
So, Oren, can you go back to the kind of comment you were making about that worry that you have where a CDR player actually this should be a not good job, and then they kind of damage the market. Does this cover that?
Yeah, there are certain markets that have had good adoption. Again, I'm not going to name names.
Of course, yeah.
Those companies are not present in this forum, but when we meet people from that certain market, we tell them, okay, we do CDR, and then the first thing they say, okay, CDR doesn't work. This is what we get from people that know the CDR. Other people that don't know about it, that's a whole different story. But when you start a sales conversation and you get CDR doesn't work, it's a big obstacle. And I think that's the big obstacle on CDR before it can become mainstream.
Yeah.
It's not about the security measures and do we stop 100% of zero-day attacks or 99%? Because no product can stop 100% and no product can ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Will ever be able to do that. But if we come and say, okay, we will maintain 95% of the document integrity, it's like saying, okay, this product is a niche product, you cannot use it. Because 95% is just not acceptable.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think
you need to be able to measure and demonstrate to potential customers.
I think the number that we should strive to is 100% of documents that go through CDR maintain integrity.
And certainly what we try for.
Yeah. And this is the main goal. I think it's more important than, okay, we can eliminate this attack and this attack. Of course, this is important, and it's immensely important when you try to sell to a security customer, to a security-oriented customer. He's going to test you and he's going to take a set of attacks and he's going to check which one bypass your product. So you want to get 100% there, but this is a very small percentage of the market. The large percentage of the market is for customers that are interested in technologies. They don't really care about 100% protection, but they do want 100% business continuity.
Yeah, but I think so that you should define that, right? So I think the benchmark is, it's almost this, right? Is safe, right? And then you have, X% of files don't make the engine, right? So don't make it, right? So what you're saying is that any file that passes with, with the engine, and if we say the engine executes this, this, and this, those files should be safe. And if they're not, it's a vulnerability, right? Either in the engine or a new type of functionality that needs to be done. But it's a bug, right? Anything that and I would like John just said, like we try to basically live by this standard, right? Where every file that makes it to the other side should be safe from the point of view of the things that we are rebuilding to known good. They should be in a known good state, known safe state.
The other aspect of this, I think, is something that maybe I thought Oren was trying to, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, this was actually besides the safety, which is kind of the key task, it's how that document's actually going to get rendered on the other side, that it appears the same as the original document, because that's we've got. For most customers, that's the real, bit in the commercial world, that's the thing is, yes, it looks and feels the same as what I started with. Whereas we know on we have a particular use case where they're less worried about that.
Yeah, I can tell you a story about a CDR in Israel. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Israeli market. Like George said, the adoption here is fantastic. Basically, every large organization has to use CDR. Either by regulation or because it's the convention. So there are many organizations that are not ruled by regulation and still choose to use CDR because everyone uses it. So this is this is what we should strive for on the global scale.
Yeah.
In Israel, the way the CDR began was from the military, from the army, where the basic CDR was very, very primitive. The mechanism would take the original document, create a PDF image, and then deliver that image to the user. So the user gets a flat file. He can see all the data. There's not much he can do with it. For example, an Excel sheet that is not transformed to a flat PDF. In the beginning, even there wasn't even the possibility to copy and paste from that. It was just an image. So the document is 100% safe. But is it useful for the end user? No. And it's good enough for the army. The army doesn't care. Okay, so we'll put someone to type in the document from the beginning. But when you try to sell it to the commercial market, it's not going to be accepted. And this is the transition that CDR has to take. It has to take the transition from 100% security to 100% usability, and then security is going to be at 95%.
So it's transparency. CDR systems should be transparent, so you literally don't know what they're there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So can you explain?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
No, you go.
So I think you're making a good point here, but it's something like this. First, I'm working with like a defense project that they defined like their their project requirements almost like 10 years ago, and they're still looking at like that flattening approach. They don't want to do like true CDR. They want to convert it to something just like clear text and something that's not. It's just like 2 or 3 file types are being approved, and usually they're like killing everything when it comes to usability, right? Sorry. But the problem, I think, like one of the main challenges here, especially like government environment, especially let's say defense zone, is because they were aware or like they were familiar with that concept of flattening. They're seeing CTR in the exact same way, right? And we had kind of this conversation as well with some players in US Gov. And from their perspective, that's where it's not just about like, okay, there are other players that they're doing a bad job and they're like killing the reputation for CDR. The experience they had in the past is like, okay, that doesn't work for me. That's like that's a stupid approach. And then you need to re-educate them of like, hey, give it another shot because it's not what you think, right? And that's a little bit more of a hard pitch because they already are biased. They already think that this is not going to solve their problem because it's going to kill pretty much their workflow. And that was a tough conversation.
Oren, would you say that ironically is the adoption in Israel, and I don't know the market, right? But is the adoption here in Israel of the flattening of the file? And I think that's a good definition, right? You flatten the file and you convert it to images or just a static PDF, right? But would you say that that helped to seed the market?
It helped, but to a point. Now it's hurting the adoption. Because when CDR started, people immediately associated CDR with flattening.
Yeah.
So that's good for some customers, for a very small percent of customers, for military, for security organizations. But then you get blocked. You cannot proceed from there. Unless you make the transition and then you re-educate the market, that CDR is no longer about flattening. You're going to be limited to selling to government and to military, which is a nice market, but it's not, I think it's not where we want to be in 5 years.
I think we found that out quite early in the process when we first started showing, our sort of first generation PDF, well, at that time, almost a prototype to people. What it led to was me having to do a huge amount of work on processing active forms in PDF documents correctly, so you could retain active form content. People do care about it, and we do put a lot of time into having that capability, and I think we are reasonably successful now with it. So it's just a matter of actually demonstrating to people that we can do that now.
Yeah, and I think maybe the bottom line is that there's a number of technologies and companies today that we probably can, and this is something I think we should define because we get to set the standard, right? Is that what do we mean by a good CDR engine, right? And like you said, like CDR could be a flattening of the file, right? In fact, that's probably where it came from, right? So we probably need to have a way to define what is CDR, what is the ways CDR, at least a certain type of engine should do, so that the market has a good way of evaluating it. But I would add, Oren, that in addition to this, right, I have to say within my peers of security, the problem is this: that it's not even on the radar, right? It's literally at the moment for a lot of my peers is basically this, right? And even worse, it bundles into the whole 0-day, I was going to write bollocks, but okay, 0A, you can you can write what you want in there, right? The shenanigans, right? Fads, which I think is, I one of you guys mentioned, I completely agree, right? We should never say that this is against 0-day attacks, right? We should say, we have to be very careful, with that saying, right? It's about, yes, we can protect against attacks that you've never seen, and in some cases, but it's not foolproof. It is not a silver bullet across the board 100%. But I think this is where we need to do some education, because I think what you're saying is that a number of people consider CDR with flattening the file, but I actually think that a good chunk of our strong community, i.e. the security professionals that will validate our technology, would recommend it and will push it internally. CDR is not on the roadmap. And maybe what we should do is figure out how can we learn from what you guys done in Israel so we can grow the market kind of worldwide.
So I think one thing we can do is we can demonstrate that we can either flatten the living daylights out of files, or we can keep content depending on whatever policies an organization wants to put in place. So you have that flexibility.
No, but I think flattening the file, they really mean taking a Word document and making it into a PDF.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, really like, taking from one format to the other, or converting an image from it, right?
But we can do that. We can either produce a very secure version of a file with, sort of all the potential interactive features, things removed, and all the metadata removed, or we can produce something which, preserves the majority of the functionality as well. And it's all choice, which, sort of adopters, users have over how they want it to operate. And the fact that you have that sort of policy-driven flexibility is a good thing to show people.
So what are the challenges you see there, right? From you guys, George and Oren, right? That we associated with flagging the file. It sometimes doesn't work. What is CDR in that level? And because this should allow us to say what actions can we take, right?
I think, again, flagging the file, it's a smaller subset, but that's kind of like used, or like, it's seen mostly like in government environments where they had that functionality in the past, right? Yeah. They already moved away from that one, or they're trying to move away from that one. So it's not like that defines 80% of the market. But again, based on our experience in Israel, like that, we do have a very big footprint there, and there are like quite a few players in Israel for CDR technology as well. But it's a matter of like they were willing to adopt because they saw adoption in other use cases, or even like government environments and so on, right? And this is again back to the original discussion where if the peers are talking to each other, the CISOs are talking, I'm using this one, I'm using that, I have this technology and so on, that drove a lot more of the adoption, right? So right now, the fact it's also like regulations so on in place for them to use it, it's even more because it went to like having more, let's say like Fortune 100 in Israel using it anyway. So it was an easy one to add. And that's kind of like a matter for us to educate and grow that one. Maybe not strategically thinking right now, let's see more tactical, maybe based on use cases first and then grow from there and so on, right? There are certain use cases where it totally makes sense. There are certain use cases where they're a lot more conservative, let's say. At the end of the day, again, media coverage is not impressive. I think Gartner mentioned it a couple of times. Some of the traditional, let's call it more like email and secure web gateways, try to implement it, and I think they're doing a pretty poor job. It damages more than actually helps, right? When it comes to like a CDR reputation. But it's a matter of like, for us, how to create a bigger, let's say if, 50% of my customers are gonna use CDR this year, and that's kind of my goal, right? That's a good one. And that means that whenever Gartner is gonna talk to these large organizations and understand like, yeah, this start getting a lot more traction, right? And that's the same thing for you. Like, I think we need to expand that number of accounts for them to actually understand a lot more so they can spread the word if you want, right?
And I guess
otherwise we can talk about like, okay, we're gonna do like joint benchmarks and collaterals and so on. We can do like a joint webinars and so on, right? But it's still gonna contain, let's say, the outreach that we can do versus the outreach that others can do. So I think the best thing we can do, again, we can do things together, but the best thing we can do is still slightly growing this outreach to different organizations that can actually be happy with the solution, right? In general, whoever buys CDR from our end, they always renew. So our product is quite sticky from that perspective. So they see the value, which is like a very good thing, right? But it's a matter of for them to spread the word. Sorry?
We did actually manage to miss a huge opportunity to raise the profile of CDR quite recently. I don't know whether anybody else spotted it, but there was a big news story going around about there was a specific image which were people using as a background on Android phones, which was bricking them because of a data overflow, because of a malformed color lookup table or something like that. I'm reluctant to sort of make too sweeping a statement here, but from what I know of how our engine is written, I'm 99% certain that we could have ameliorated that one and stopped it, but we never got involved in the discussion.
I mean, I don't want, this is kind of like my personal opinions. I'm not going to represent OPSOT on this claim, right? But in general, I don't like this kind of like marketing pitch, like, hey, there's this new outbreak out there, and then like 15 different companies are coming out with like a blog post and news like, this is how we would have prevented if we were deployed in your environment. Mm. You really messed up because you didn't use us. Like, I know, if an organization gets hacked 50 different companies sends email like, you need to buy my solution to fix your problem, right? It's a matter of, for us, I know that's still like that reactive way of handling things. Right? That's exactly the same thing. Like, I know the antivirus. Oh, I need to sacrifice gold. I'm gonna run a signature. Look, I'm able to prevent that one, but that's already too late, right? Same thing here. It's a matter of
a golden opportunity to demonstrate what CDR is and what it can do and how it does it and how it works. But well, there you go.
But it is just the ambulance, right? But sorry, all right.
I totally agree with George about this, that there are always attacks, and then you see a huge wave of, yeah, we could have prevented it. Okay, could have, would have, didn't. Your product is a niche product. We didn't choose to use you. Thank you very much. I think that in order for CDR to gain more traction, I think the main problem is to show that we are not hurting business as usual, the business continuity. I think that collaboration between companies in terms of this is the security actions that we take and this is how we do it. This is not really something, it's not going to happen. Let's be open. It's not going to happen, okay? I'm not going to share with OPSWAT what we do in terms of security. OPSWAT is not going to share that with me because that would take away our competitive advantage. I think that the main problem is that we have other players that go into the market with a product that is not stable, that is not of good quality, and that product goes out with a very nice price tag. Sometimes they have a very good marketing team, so they get a lot of traction, and then it just ruins the market. I think one thing that we could agree to collaborate on would be a very basic benchmark, very basic set of documents that we can agree this is the basic set that we test on, and to show that the products can take those documents and provide a usable document at the end of the process. So this is something that I wouldn't have problem sharing with other companies. We could come up with a set of 100 or 1,000 or I don't know how many sample documents from various types. And as soon as we agree this is the benchmark, it's going to be very easy for us to say, okay, based on the CDR benchmark, we can provide 99.something% of document fidelity. And please ask the other guys to tell you what they can provide on this data set.
Mm-hmm. So we
not
also
talking about security.
In fact, you know, we have a session in an hour and a half that is exactly on that one, right? And that was, to be fair, when we designed this, that was kind of my hope for this is that that's one of the agreed sort of outcomes that we'll want to work together, which is exactly that, create a common set of files, right? That can be used to, you know, to determine, you know, or to benchmark at least at a certain level, right? The different players, right? And like you said, to make sure that, you know, if there are players out there who are providing a substandard CDR capability, they get caught on, right? And we have an easy way for the customers to determine that, you know, these companies do a certain level. Because I do feel that when you look at the technology, right, there's a minimum standard that technology has to do, but then beyond that, it's all about the customer service, the customer engagement, the usability of the product, you know, how easy it is to integrate. Is it cloud native? You know, is it, you know, does it run on Docker? Does it run on multiple places? Is it easy to integrate? Is it to ask to SDK? You know, what's the usability of the UI? All that stuff, I feel it's going to be massive differentiators. But I think that in a lot of cases, you know, either we don't get there because the users don't believe or the technology don't have experience, or like you said, don't have the peers talking about it, or they've been burned by, you know, some other part of CDR who actually didn't end up working as effectively. So I think there's plenty of places for us to compete based on, you know, usability and all those properties that are outside the core engine that I think all of us have a pretty good one. Because all of us have happy customers who have validated technology, who vouch for it, and who are happy with, I think one of you guys mentioned, like we don't get pushback on the quality of our rebuild files, on files that make it through, that shouldn't make it through, right? That's not where we see attrition with customers.
The only thing I would say, and I think I said, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
What I said at the beginning when we talked about the common test set, right? Again, same thing with the anti-malware vendors. The first thing I would do is say, okay, the moment we put together this one, I'm gonna make sure my technology is covering as much as possible, and I'm gonna spend time for my technology to do like 100% correct sanitization for all those files if it's not already, right? So, and also the fact that test is being done independently or by each vendor separately, it's gonna be a different topic, right? So either that's gonna be a, I don't know, live, always growing data set or something like that for each vendor to add what's unique and stuff. Yeah. Other than that, it's going to be the first one. Let's say if one of the vendors is doing like 30%, right? 2 months later, he's going to do maybe like 50% or 60% or something like that. And like, I don't know, in 3 months, in 6 months, he's going to do like 100%. It's like, yeah, I'm as good as like everyone else, right? But he's playing catch up, particularly on that data set. I know we talked as like, yes, there's pretty much the same definition for the files and so on, but there's like, I think a lot more than that, right? Like what you do on those file types, maybe you're not covering all the embedded logic, maybe you're not covering all the edge cases and so on, right? So again, you're drafting your detection, because at the end of the day, it's gonna be % of your detection, right? To that particular sample set, not the real life scenario. So that's what I'm saying, like, this needs to be like a highly maintained data set that's gonna show more like, kind of, the edge for each of the technology, let's say, right? I'm supporting a very specific file for a particular country in a particular region. They're not using maybe Office Suite, they're using something else. And I use this particular file to say, yeah, I'm way better. But a US customer is not going to care about that one much, right? So it's going to be sort of in that direction at some point.
Look, you know, like I said, like this is a public repo that we've published where we starting to publish, you know, that set of data files, right? And I agree that it has to be a movable data set. It has to keep being improving. It has to be specific to a couple of layers. And, you know, in a way, it's about raising the bar, right? It's about raising the bar on what that is. And actually, one of the recommendations, like we're trying to pursue internally, but I think it's good for us to collaborate, is the ISGs, right, which already provide a lot of that data. So if you look at the ISGs, this is the structure. They are already this way where they provide, validate this, do that, do that. And in fact, one of the pieces of work that we would try to do here at the summit, we're going to continue, is to extract these requirements from here and then try to put them into a kind of a JSON document so that we can consume it. So in a way, these ISG documents, which are pretty good documents, right, which is provided by, you know, first pass by the NSA, but, you know, I think we should improve them. We should bring our own recommendations. I think also provide a really good way to have a pragmatic, you know, look at how it works, so that, was it a PDF one that I created, I think? So that when you actually look at, you know, eventually we can even have a JSON file that starts to look like this, right? Where, you know, if you look at it, you know, you got the source file, there's the signature, there's what you need to do, what actions you need to do, the reference, and even some CVEs eventually that got prevented by this. So if we have a file format that has this thing, which now links to test files, we can have an objective way to say the reason why we do this is because there's actually part of this standard or this, you know, inspection sanitization guidance, that the recommendation of that standard is that you should remove these things. Yeah. Right? And then it's objective, right? And what you're doing is you're raising the bar, right? And yes, there's going to be corner cases, and I think some products might compete on their ability to really go down to detail every single version of Office, right? Where others might compete on, we have wide coverage of file formats. But I agree with Oren that, you know, until we have a basic level of files and a basic level of, these are the core requirements that we expect a CDR engine to do, it's very hard for the customers to evaluate it. And then the industry struggles to grow, right? Because there's not a lot of benchmarks, and you don't reward the companies who are investing heavily in making their engine to be really good.
I think that the main goal of this benchmark would be to prevent bad players from entering the market. I think that today there is no bar. Anyone say we do CDR and let the customer
But
shave
it's a
on
free
the
market.
product. Yeah.
It's a free market. You're not going to be able to say, hey, if you haven't run this test, you're not allowed to sell CDR, right? You're not allowed to market to several CDR players. So.
But it is going to be a statement, because if we agree to provide this benchmark, first of all, the fact that the files are currently under a glass wall, they prevent me at RESEC from using them. I cannot go to a customer and tell them, hey, my product does 98% of the glass wall benchmark. That's a very bad statement.
Yeah.
But assuming we can overcome this, if we go to the market and say this standard CDR benchmark, I conform to 98% of it, and the customer says, okay, I'm now testing another product, and we know that all of our companies are using that as a benchmark, we can always say, okay, please test this standard benchmark. It's a market standard. Please use that. Ask the other guy to use that. And if the other company does a good job there, that's great. I'm happy to see another player. At this stage, the market is very small. It's just going to grow. We are not really competing. We're not on a fully saturated market. It's just a very small market that no one knows about. So if there are more strong players, that's good for us. It's not bad for us.
It sounds like you're almost talking about some sort of trade association or independent body like the people who look after the Wi-Fi trademarks and things. You know, you're not allowed to call it Wi-Fi and use the trademark unless you demonstrate compliance with, you know, the industry body standards and that stuff.
That's a long way to go, but if we can agree on the standard.
A complicated thing to do, but it seems to be the sort of direction of travel which is sort of implied by that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. So we create an independent organization, maintain this data set. It's a committee. It's not done by one company, because that way the company can influence what goes there. It will not show the weaknesses. It will only show the strong points.
Mm-hmm.
If we can conform to this, and we can, you know, we have a logo to display on our website, CDR, whatever, benchmark, like
consortium.
That could work. That would drive other players to use the same benchmark.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you, and I feel that today that is a good example. So I don't know. I know how much you guys are into Worldly Maps, right? And if you're not, I highly recommend you take a look. There's a bunch of sessions during this summit about Worldly Maps and how to measure it. But Worldly Maps talks about the evolution of industries from Genesis to custom build to product and commodity. One of the properties that you have when it moves more into the the product space, is an effective way to compare products. It's a benchmark. Is industry recognized standards that if you're comparing this product versus that product, there's a pragmatic way of doing that, so that when new products come into that space, there's a minimal bar that you expect all of them to do. So yeah, you know, Oren, I'm completely with you on this one, right? I guess, look, what do you want to call it? While we're here, let's just, you know, so it's a common location for CDR benchmark files, right? Non-company specific, right? And it's basically, you know, you got a CDR compliant logo, and it's just, we just need a common place, right? This can just be a GitHub repo, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to complicate it too much, right? Yeah. Oh, sorry, GitHub organization.
And now you come to the complications. So who is going to be a member? Who is going to be able to influence? We let you know, the new players take control of this, and no, maybe they will drive it to. It's a complicated thing to manage. It's not easy.
Well, that's why it hasn't been done, right? But hey, you know, that never stopped me. It's like, you know, it's like but this is the beginning of it. Like, I feel like, you know, the realities, and look, an industry association is created by the members of the industry, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right? Is create a group of players who care about CDR, right? Who, I think the whole point of this is basically, it's very simple, right? It's basically open governance, right? We don't have to complicate this too much, right? Open governance, it's about, players wanting to come together, right? My experience with open organizations is that there's already a very strong barrier of entry, right? Literally, it already takes a special type of person, special type of company, special type of folk to even want to be engaged, especially when everything is done on the open, which in this case, it has to be, right? So look, if you want to, like we can use the Open Security Summit, right? It's already, there. Now I'm going to disclose that I'm part of the organization, right? So there's, you could say it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, but this is a CIC company, right? So if you want to start using the Open Security Summit to collaborate, we could, right? And it's already open governance. Everything is open. As you can see, all the sessions are transparent. So, would the Open Security Summit be a good place, or do you actually want to get something else to put it there?
It's certainly a starting point.
So I think, again, like the CDR consortium is definitely going to help, but again, it's going to help amongst us. And I think, and don't get me wrong, Warren, I think here is a pain point, right? But I don't think, let's say, not necessarily killing the small players or like, I don't know, discredit the ones that are not doing a good job. It's more about like how we spread the word to people that actually never heard about CDR and so on, right? And let's say out of like a 100% market share that we should have, maybe this is gonna tackle maybe like 5%, maybe 10%, I don't know. But I haven't seen this one as to be like that big of an issue comparing to like the, I don't know, effort we need to do to educate prospects and so on the value of CDR, right? So that's what I'm saying, like this will help, again, that more small portion, let's say, more or less. Again, I don't know if it's like 5%, maybe it's 30%. I don't know to give you a good number, but I haven't seen, maybe you guys have seen a lot more often. I haven't seen that often, right? For me, it's a lot more to educate them on the value, and then they're gonna actually buy it. And on that one, that's pretty much using, I don't know, OPSOT, I don't know, lead flow and so on. It's not actually going to different organizations, media relations and things like that, right? So
actually, I don't think the target market for this is the small players. Although I think that it's a nice side effect, right? That it raises the bar, right? And and it affects one of the pain points that Oren is mentioning. I actually think that the biggest market that this is going to address is this crowd, because I would say that as a as a CISO, as somebody or as a senior security professional, that if somebody tells me here's an engine, right, that does a bunch of stuff, one thing I would want is give me a test suite. Right now, I might look at that test suite and going, all right, are they gaming the test suite? Although I think in our case, it's easier to create a couple more variations, or it's easy, like for example, like the thing about the AVs is that you can literally take an AV, mutate it a little bit with a bit of scripting, and that you're now passing through everything, right? Or a lot of them. So, the reality is that, if you give me a CDR engine and no test cases, then I'm like, holy shit, how do I test this, right? If you give me a CDR engine or CDR engines and give me a suite of test cases that, in a way, the test case already explain what it does, right? And that's the irony, right? For example, I start using polyglot files in our demos, the polyglot files that, you got multiple files and you got a zip inside the JPEG, etc., just because it was a really nice way to explain what we do. Hey, here's a file. It's actually a zip file. If I unzip it, it has all sorts of stuff. Pass it to the engine. Hey, it's not there, right? The same way that you can show a file with macros. They say you show a file with that passes virus total, it doesn't. So I think that creating that set of use case files, common location of files, actually helps us to tell the story of what we do. So I actually feel the big market here is that either 99% of the market that today is not using CDR, that should. If you make a dent on that, you just grow the market quite substantially.
Okay, this is my take on this one. It's a matter of like, first, I don't think necessarily addresses that CDR doesn't work, or maybe address CDR doesn't work in the scope of like, they're already biased, thinking like flattening and so on, right? But from from my perspective, at least, again, OPSOT experience, if someone goes in POC, we always kind of like win that deal, right? Like if someone's willing to spend the time to check the technology, they'll always buy it. So from that perspective, if I already need to provide them the benchmark files or not, if they're willing to spend time on it, that for me, it's almost like a done deal, right? From that moment on, it's more like procurement, legal, go terms, and so on, right? But other than that, technology validation, I never had like one problem on that one. The problem that I have is pretty much for me to, I don't know, for people to know about technology, right? And that's what I'm saying, that this exercise to have the benchmark files, which again, I'm not disagreeing, it's a good thing. But again, it's not gonna increase, it's not gonna move the needle that much for us. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you want to go actually to have like a way bigger market share, penetration rate, adoption, whatever you want to call it, right? It's more of like the big picture. This is focusing, I think, on a very specific percentage, like it's a very small one actually.
So you're saying it's
that's how I see it.
Market, this part here.
Yeah, and that benchmark or like even the CDR consortium and so on, I don't think that's going to educate the market, because at the end of the day, again, this is George speaking on his own. Like if an organization is going to come and say this is the best thing since sliced bread, but we are all the players in the market that actually build this one, that's a biased message, right? Like that's already kind of like, yeah, of course we're going to say CDR is the best because that's our product, that's our baby. We're not going to say our baby is stupid, right? But at the same time, it's going to be a matter of like, okay, how the word is going to cross, like how, I know, what's going to be more or less like that referral percentage, that NPS and things like that, right? How they're going to promote us. And that's where I think we're lacking a lot more confidence from the market, or adoption, let's say, right? And again, I think we're struggling with also the fact that in cybersecurity, not a lot of customers or like kind of organizations are willing to do like testimonials and publicly disclose what they put in front of their or like the security measures they put in place, right? So it's a little bit hard for you to get a lot of traction from that side as well. So it's always going to be kind of like a chicken and egg, right? The more it's going to see adoption, then they're going to be a lot more open to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other comments?
I don't know. I think there is some space for some sort of like joint program of education of this is what CDR is and this is what it does, beyond pushing it as a solution to everything. I mean, you know, a lot of technologies have taken that approach. Like, I mean, who the heck knew what Wi-Fi was before somebody put a nice label on IEEE 811.2 or whatever the heck the number was, and you know, demonstrated the use cases and you know, established a common understanding of it. And that's kind of where we are, of like actually getting some knowledge in the potential marketplace of what CDR is and what it does. Because, you know, after working on this stuff for 11 years and talking about it to my peers, I still almost invariably have to find myself starting from page one, describing what I do for a living, which suggests, you know, we haven't done a particularly good job of educating people about what CDR is. You know, we probably need to do better.
I think it's one of the reasons why some of the definitions, if you look at Wikipedia, it's kind of so basic, is because it is so niche, and there's such a, I think there's such a limited knowledge out there. I think if it was a more mature market and a bit more widespread, then you'd probably still have better links off to something that had a bit more technical impact for the people that actually wanted it.
Yeah.
So, Oren, could we go back to that definition? I believe it was you who said this, right? The CDR should be based on 100% business usability and 95% security. What's that 95 and what's the 5?
I think the security side of CDR is going to be per vendor. So OPSOT is going to do a great job against this type of attack. It's very difficult to measure how a product does in terms of security. I'm not familiar of any benchmark, any good benchmark for sandboxes, for example. There is a benchmark for antiviruses, but I think it's not applicable for our case. We can't It's very complicated to have a similar setup here.
Sorry, guys, I've only just jumped back into the conversation now, but I'm just looking at that CDR should be based on 100% usability, 95% security. It just made me think back on sometimes hearing about how the CDR solutions just help a company kind of manage their risk. So about reducing risk, I'm not sure if that's 100% incorporated under the security percentage. And then also, is there an aspect of threat intelligence to include, or business intelligence where CDR can, have a side value of telling an organization what types of files, where the risks are coming from, and understanding what types of files are traveling through their organization. I'm not sure.
So as an example, for instance, what you showed before with the JSON you want to put together, right? We kind of like already do that internally. We put it in a nice table in a PDF and so on, not necessarily like for JSON consumption, but I kind of like the idea for us to have that one as part of the benchmark, let's say, on like things and how, because again, when you're talking with folks, they're looking at like, yeah, I already block macros, so I'm safe, right? There's a lot more to it than just macros or things like that. So this is like the moment that I think it's going to become more like an industry standard, if you want, right? And just OPSAT claiming it, or I don't know, Glasswall and so on. Then I think it's going to get a lot more traction on that one as well. So that is an idea I like. Yeah, we're doing it, but I think it needs to be voiced by I don't know, a lot more people as well.
Yeah. And I feel that, when you go back to that, security peers are not recommending, right, with CDPR. I feel is that we need more players talking about CDR, right?
Yeah. Because
that's the key, right? So I think you hit it really well, right? Like, when we talk about CDR, we have zero credibility, right? Because guess what? Maybe we have 10% credibility or 50% or whatever, 30%.
I hope more, yeah.
Okay, we have more than zero because we are expert of it. Okay, let's say we have 30 to 50%, but it's still a very biased approach, right? So what we want is we need, non-CDR players, right? Talking about CDR, right? Because that's when you start to get that adoption, right? That's when you get, but that's why I feel that having good benchmarks, having good ways to explain, like you just said, we don't just do macros, or we don't just take a macro, we do all these other things, or you have, some products have the ability to do this, this, and this, right? I feel it's a great way to educate, because you're also allowing other players to explain what we do, but also allow other players to be the hero, right? We allow these other players saying, hey, look, I don't have to worry about this. Like, I like the idea to say that, you go to users and say, you can click on things, right? You can open attachments, it's okay, right? I feel I'm a CISO that I can actually tell my user base that you guys can click on attachments. You can open the stuff you got on email. Where before we had to do education, or you had to make sure that we had the endpoints deployed, and, and we still have incidents, right? So as a CISO, I went from files being a problem that is on my radar to not being on my radar, because I don't care if Jonathan clicks on an attachment and a Word document or PDF that he gets, because we pass all our emails to the engine. But that's the kind of story that I think we need out there, right? Because that's a non-CDR player. Okay, now of course it's tainted if I say that from Glasswall, but I think we need to find these use cases where we have non-CDR players talking about CDR, and to the level of details that we do, right? Because we do go to the level of detail. We do analyze the files. We do rebuild the files in a safe way, which is not for the faint of heart, right? That's why there's only so many companies, right, that do this, because it does take quite a bit of research and a good of engineering to pull this off. Cool. Well, we almost, to the time. So kind of next step. So I kind of capture this. So I think we kind of have an agreement that one area we can work together is this common location for, and that, so agree on core set of files and core location, right? What other concrete actions? So maybe the collaboration of the JSON format. So this is basically the idea of creating an open source. So if you look at that ISG repo, and again, we can host it somewhere else. The one was hosted on the Open Security Summit. But the idea of this ISG repo is to go through the documents and extract the, the ISG information. And by the way, you probably want to take a look at the sessions that we had last week and this week on it. So if you go to the Summit website, these are all the sessions we did last week on ISG. And each of these, you can come and there's the video there. So you can, take a bit of time if you want to see how we were thinking about this. And I think the last one, you guys did a really cool presentation, right, on the PDFs, right? That's one also happened this week. So we're trying to kind of move the needle forward. So one is that repo, that is where we can innovate and push the JSON files and try to extract from those ISGs the requirements so that we can map to what each of our engines do. And I actually think that if you can connect, right, this, so I would actually say that if we can connect this common location of benchmark files, and we can actually connect this to ISG requirements, we'll find that there's going to be a number of agencies and other entities that we're going to basically say, hey, this is really good.
I think.
Sorry.
I was just say one of the things I was kind of looking at when we were kind of going through this is how easy it would be to create from the ISGs some simple comparison metrics of how many of those you could actually do, because if you actually look at them, you tend to have validations and action. They call them all actions, but some of them are just validations and some are what you do upon that validation. And you could potentially create some simple metrics from them. It's not necessarily always straightforward, because quite often you could do one of a number of different things between them. But I think you could definitely, I think you could kind of use it, to create some sort of like comparison metrics.
Yeah, but so the idea here is that, you don't have to do it all, right? Once you have this core set of files, you just need to map which ISGs to the core files, right?
Well, I think first, ideally would be, let's say that we can actually maintain that every time the files are being updated, each of the vendors, or maybe we have like I don't think it's ever going to happen to have like a common deployment of all the technologies to run this one for all the tests and so on, because that will be pretty much giving access to all our competitors to our technology. I don't think anybody's going to agree on that one.
Well,
we're quite open on
right? Look, if you want, you can do it for us, right? We have the file.
Exactly same thing for us.
Yeah, right? So it's already there, right? So this is rate limited, but if you want to, play with our engine, you can literally come in here, download a test file, and then just pass it to the engine, right? So it's rate limited a little bit, but it's already available, right? It's a REST call that you can do, and you can see the stuff there, right? So
yep.
But I think you guys.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have a REST API.
We have.
So
yeah, and it's mayfender.com available for everybody. So from that perspective, it's not necessarily a problem on that end. Let's say what I'm trying to say is that ideally would be for us to be able to run the test, read the specifications. The reason I like that you want to put it in JSON that it can be easily consumed. You can tie those ones to the files, and then based on the report, you're gonna know exactly what has been addressed and not, right? And that's kind of something we can spit out for each of the vendors, and that's how you build that matrix as well. And that might be even easier for the end users to decide, right? At the end of the day, regardless of how many number of file types you support and so on, I think in general, 90% of the traffic is gonna be like 15 file types, let's say just like 20, right? It's not gonna be, I don't know, 500 file types or something like that. Some of them have like more, even like some government, very limited access type of files, satellite images and so on, but those are not gonna be much, let's say, from that perspective and so on. So back to this one, I do like the idea for us to be able to run this one and to generate that report, right? I'm not sure how many players gonna want to do that. I don't have a problem with that, to be honest, right? But it might be a nice way for you to have that comparison metrics on all the indicators, let's say, that CDR should have a validation.
And Oren, that's what you were talking about, right?
Yep, exactly.
Look, we have three main players here, right? Look, if we do it, then the other ones either come up with their own or join the party, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I think the nice thing of being three is that one is weird, two is like, where's everybody? Three, it's already a crowd, right? So I think, thank you guys for joining in, because it already feels like a good group, right?
Yep.
So cool. Well, actually, that was the session we got at 5. So maybe we can, can do a bit there. If you guys could join in, or at the beginning of that one. In terms of action, so we could collaborate on this. There's some education things. Oren, I had another question for you. Like, when you talk about government regulation for CDR, is that published?
Yes, of course.
Can you send us some links? Because I haven't seen that, right? Like the only,
Do you read Hebrew?
No, but hopefully we can probably get it translated.
Okay, yeah, I think the regulations are in Hebrew, and they are pretty bad. The quality is pretty bad. Even if you understand Hebrew, the quality of the requirements is just bad. And some of the things are just plain wrong, and I wouldn't go there.
Well, but actually, but the bottom line is that, okay, it's the first one that we have that is actually a requirement, right?
Well, I think that if it would be an English version, that would be a very good sales tool for everybody, right? Because I think first, Israel is being seen like a cyber nation, right? And whatever they define as regulation in government and so on can actually be seen like an endorsement for the technology, right? And that will be kind of like back to the idea of like non-CDR players talking about CDR.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's my point. So my idea was like, if we can translate to English, the CDR, regulation, right? We can adjust it a little bit, but it already comes with that pedigree, right?
Have you gone on tenders, the documents that you have to fill before tenders?
Yeah.
So this is an especially very bad written tender. It's translating it would be just terrible. And at the end of the day, we would end up with about 5 things about CDR, and all the rest is about things that are not related to CDR.
Yeah, I'm only after the CDR bit, right? Because actually,
I can look for it. I can try to find if there is anything useful there.
Yeah.
Begin working with.
But look, because if you think about it, right? Even if you look at the maturity of CDR, right, across the globe, it will follow this pattern, right? It follows the pattern that government agencies or even recommendations start to come, and the more we can give them the text, the easier it is for them to do it, right? It's like, if we can say, look, here's an example of a good definition of a CDR that could be added to a SOW or, a statement of work for a piece of work, then, to be fair, we had that a bit in US, right? We had a couple of situations where we got recommended from the high level, and that made a massive difference, right? But I think we can see the market and we can facilitate that to occur. So yeah, so if you could share that, that would be great. And then we can have a translation. Look, we get the option to change it a bit, right? We can say, look, this is how we would describe it, right?
I would share a translation, but just to manage expectation, I don't think that's a good base to start from.
Yeah. Well,
mostly around flattening.
Yeah.
I will send something.
But look, at the moment we got 0, right? So it's like, you go up a little bit, it's better than where we started, right? So it's a very
rudimentary list of supported files. I don't think there are a list of actions that you need to do there. I will send, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah, but look, for example, like OWASP, right, had a really good success with this project, right? So I know this was a project that helped a lot, right? And well, I think it's not anymore on this thing. There you go, right? So basically, this so this project was really cool, right? Because he actually had like an example of the kind of things that you want to ask when you do an RFP for security, and it made difference, because instead of somebody having to make up, if I'm commissioning a piece of software or an application, everything I should ask for, this RFP helped organizations to then embed security in their procurement process, right? So, and I think that's the kind of thing that we can share. Like we can share, we could seed the market with these kind of, best practices, and then, let the players compete, right? But I think at the moment, we put a lot of requirements on the consumer, right? The consumer or the buyer of our products having to do a lot of legwork. And I think, George, you mentioned that we have a funnel on attrition, and then we know that once they do take a look at it, they really like it. The question is, how do we get them to that stage, right? And as a consumer of technology, I'm happy to tell you that, when I was at a bigger company, I have 100 teams I can be looking at, right? So even for a technology to get into the 10 or 20 that we're paying attention that year, there's already a number of them that, fall to the cracks. And I think at the moment, we are one of those technologies that doesn't make it into that short list of the short lists in a lot of companies. So cool. Any final comments on this session or what we talked about?
I think there will be a couple more sessions like this soon, or should be.
Yeah, look, I feel that at the moment Glasswall is a bit overrepresentative. I hope next time you guys can bring more of your engineers. So, Jonathan has somebody he can argue against, right? And
let's not do it at 6 a.m. and I'm pretty sure I can bring some more folks.
I know, I'm very sorry, right? We actually had some sessions a bit later. Actually, 6 a.m. So you're in the
West Coast, San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yes, sorry about that. And thanks a lot for making the time, man.
Sure, no worries. Good. I had my coffee, so I'm fresh now.
Brilliant. And Oran, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I've been asked, actually, I'm part of the organization. This is self-inflicted problem. But I'm just going to do, if you guys want to jump out, it's cool. I'm just going to do a quick just wrap up of the session, and then I stop recording. But we're good. So, hi. So at this session, the CDR Roundtable, how to collaborate and increase adoption. I think we had a really good example of the power of the summit, where we bring multiple players together. It's a niche topic, but it's one of those topics that there's a number of players and individuals around the world that care deeply about a particular, topic. I keep repeating the word topic. On this, in this case, CDR, and we had a really good collaboration, multiple players from multiple, in a way, we competitors, but this is a great place to find a common ground, and we agreed on the creation of a common set of files that we can use to benchmark this. We're going to work together on this in a neutral environment. We're going to try to use some of the JSON formats for this. Translate to English a couple of recommendations that exist out there, but also work on how we can educate the market on the business advantages of this technology, which actually work, and it makes a lot of difference, and it saves the day in lots of companies, but it's still quite a niche product today. So, very productive, and thanks, and see the session for a good overview of what we've done and how the sausage is actually made, right? This is how collaboration actually happens within the industry. And I'll stop recording.